we have got a treat for you. It's Good Judy. And we have a new Good Judy for your ear holes this week. Brigitte is out getting a little cosmetic procedure done.
Yes.
And in
She'll
her
finally
absence,
have hits now. She'll finally have hits.
We are joined by the lovely and talented SZN Alxndr.
Hey, baby, how you doing today?
Child, you know. I'll ask. Well, you're the guest. You go first. How are you, SZN?
You know, I'm doing, for what it's worth, for what the world is going through right now, I'm doing pretty good. This past week, I went to the first round of Dragnificent auditions at the New Future
Not
Club.
audition. The competition started.
Oh, the competition. Sorry, the competition started, and it was such a great experience. It was like the Tri-Wizard tournament, for lack of a better phrase. Almost so many, because, you know, most of the girls, they work Wednesday through Sunday. So this thing happened on Tuesday. There's so many heavy hitters in the room and so much good raw talent. So I'm kind of like, you know, empowered and like jolted of energy from watching that. And, you know, I've just been gigging and, you know, doing things and having a great time in the city. How you doing?
Yeah, I got your little gig this week.
And I am so thankful you got me this gig. Girl, call me SZN Alxndr Rex from now on.
Well, girl, I look out for my tribe, for my people, and like once you're in, and like you are such a professional, and you're a good time gal, and you work hard, and like, you're getting your flowers, and you much deserved, baby.
I'm just trying to show up on time and have a good time.
So what was the gig? What was the gig like?
Oh, the everybody's talking about Jamie gig.
That one, and yeah. So like the stuff, the gigoramas.
Oh, the gigorama. So I did there was the Atlanta premiere for an Amazon movie that was adapted from a West End musical called Everybody's Talking About Jamie. It's about like this coming of age. Jamie. It's a coming of age story about a queer boy in high school in England or London. I keep on forgetting the Sheffield, yes. And he wants to be a drag queen right out of high school, which is, you know, I guess that's what the girls are doing now.
It's so cute.
I know. I can't wait to watch it. I had to go from gig to gig. But I saw that you interviewed the cast last night. And number one, you look sickening.
Oh, thank you. You know, little purple high hair drag, you know.
It was giving me a fembot, very big.
Oh, very, very that, yes, bitch.
Like your titties were about to start just shooting.
Bum, 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 bum. Yeah, girl, I can't even, there's so much going on right now. Okay, so we're gigging. We got the gigs. For me, school has started. I'm overwhelmed.
Good.
Teaching.
You know, sometimes it's good to be in that space. You're at Spelman. You made it. You're at Spelman.
I am.
You're at Spelman. That's epic. That's, oh my goodness. Where else are you going in the world?
You know, I'm just helping to shape these young, beautiful Black minds. Yeah, I'm teaching choreography and improvisation, and it was first day, so we didn't do much, but next week I'm going in. No.
Yeah. Graduate level. Okay, getting together.
No, I'm just excited because I love teaching, and as much as I teach them, I'm like, oh, they're teaching me too. So I'm trying to like get all the new vibes. Is that what they call it? I don't know. Anyway,
stay current. It's important.
Yeah,
very important.
So there's that, and I'm trying to not watch the news. I know that's horrible.
You know, I hate the fact that the news is what I watch the most these days. And I think it's, you know, during primetime lockdown, everybody just couldn't get their eyes off the news because that's the only thing that made sense. And now it's like a bad boyfriend. I'm trying to get away, but he just got that good news.
Good dick.
Yeah, it's destroying my mind, but guess what? I'm here.
Oh my gosh.
But
yeah.
Yeah, the Atlanta world has been rocked this week. We had that one case with the young lady who was walking her dog in Piedmont Park.
That was a
And,
couple
that
weeks
kind of
ago.
shook up
Mm-hmm.
a couple weeks ago. And, of course we know the nighttime is not safe, but it's kind of hit the community in which we reside in, which is the nightlife
Yeah.
world. And if for those who don't work in nightlife, if I'm a drag queen, I'm just not talking to the drag queen. I'm talking to the person at the door. I'm talking to the person who owns the building. I'm talking to the bartenders. I'm talking to everybody. And we all look out for each other, even if we don't directly, the
Mm-hmm.
DJs, the
The
promoters, and
the homeless person on the street that you see and like give $1 to, like,
right, the homeless person who's looking after your car because they know that you give them $1 every once in a
right.
while. You don't know how many times they have helped me out.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we lost another kind, beautiful soul that didn't need to go. And her name is Mariam Abdulram. I want to make sure I'm saying her name correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, she unfortunately, and the way that the news broke was it was jarring because I woke up and it's getting to the point where I don't even want to open my stories on Instagram anymore because I don't know
Yeah.
what I'm gonna get.
Yeah.
One moment it was, hey, Miriam is missing. She left her job at 4 a.m. because she's a bartender, and unfortunately, the service industry is the scapegoat right now for this pandemic, and there's no refuge for them. And of course, I don't want to get riled up, but it went from she's missing to at 6 a.m. and then 10 a.m. it was her body was found, and it was kind of jarring to know that she was followed.
Yeah.
Trigger warning, of course, she was followed at her doorstep, kidnapped, and then her life was taken.
Yeah.
And she's
We
an amazing bartender, and we've all worked with her. Yeah.
Yeah, she's our good Judy of the week. The
Hmm.
service community and just the nightlife community in Atlanta has definitely been rocked, and it also makes us have to take a step back and realize that we're not invincible. I know a lot of times as a drag performer, I'm like, oh, bitch, I put on my heels, my lashes, my wig. You can't tell me shit. And I be sashaying down the road. And then, like, the quick reminder, bitch, you're a regular, degular ass, bitch,
Hello.
that if someone wants to harm you, they're going to. And you have to look out for yourself. And like I hope that no one is walking to their cars after gigs by themselves. Like
Hmm.
I was talking about this with it's nice to just when you leave your friends at the bar to have a thing where you're always like, I got home, I made it home. I'm leaving and then I made it home, which is we have to help each other in that way because you know
Yeah, it's funny. She specifically, I think she saw me stumbling on the street one day, walking back to my
why were
car.
you stumbling, girl?
I just had a great conversation beforehand, and it just rocked me for my
Oh,
world,
okay, 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 cool, cool,
Uh,
cool, 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 cool.
and maybe some alcohol was involved, which is not, there's no shame in have drinking, you know
Yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean? But I was walking, I wasn't driving. She literally stopped the car she was in. She was in the back seat, and she was like, you better text me when you get home. And I was like,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay. But there's this conversation that I can't shake. Of course, it's the let me know when you get home safe, or walk with somebody to your car, or somebody even proposed this idea of an app where you hold on the screen until you're in safety.
mm,
But the scenario here is that she was at her doorstep,
right,
and it gets to the point where it's like, at what point do I just live in constant fear? I have male privilege, so I have to be checked with that reality. But it's just getting to the point where it's like, what is safety? But anybody can fall victim to this. And we lost a good one in our community. And, it's getting to the point where there's like almost, I think, 2 or 3 murals out right now around the city.
yeah.
And every time I come across it, it's a heart wrenching scenario.
We are sending one out for you, Miriam. Thank you for your service to the community, and you will definitely be missed. We
Hmm.
also have another good Judy,
Yes.
Nicole Ari Parker, who
Yes.
is
Nicole
joining
Ari
the cast of
Parker.
Sex in the City. They said, fuck Kim Cattrall. Like,
Well,
she
no,
don't want to
Kim
fuck with
Cattrall
us,
said
fuck
fuck
her,
y'all.
and we're gonna add a black lady. So she married my husband, Miss Nicole, which is really rude. She married my husband, Boris Kojo. I'll let her have that, and I'll let her have these flowers as well. What do you think? Do you think they need a black person on Sex in the City?
You know, when I heard that they added her, well, number one, okay, let's just get this gay. Let's get this gay. Um, I'm ready for the Sex and the City, the movie, the third iteration.
Is it the movie or is it a series?
I'm pretty sure it's the movie. Hold up, series. It's a
Yes,
series?
girl.
Okay. Oh, I thought it was the movie. Okay,
No,
sorry,
girl.
y'all.
No, the movies are done. The movies are dead.
The movies are done. Okay, I'm sorry. You know, when people say series these days, I don't know if they're talking about a Netflix, a Hulu, or Amazon,
Mm-mm.
or movie. It's all getting conglomerated. Okay, great. Well, the last thing that we left off was Sex and the City, the movie two.
Yeah,
That movie is the worst movie I've
it's
ever seen.
trash.
It's so horrible.
They,
And I tell people the first movie is my favorite movie of all time. So it's
girl,
just kind of
really?
like,
We gonna have to
listen,
talk.
we can talk. We can talk about it. It was just where it came. I just love it from beginning to end, Jennifer Hudson. Anyway,
Okay,
but when
cool.
I saw this, I was like, huh,
Mm.
how are they going to replace what everybody loved about Kim Cattrall?
Mm-hmm.
Kim Cattrall, she left because she was feuding with Sarah Jessica Parker throughout the whole iteration of Sex and the City.
Yeah.
And I think it came down to the point where there's an interview. If you go out and search an interview that Kim Cattrall gives, she was basically like, I was down to do the third movie, and then Sarah Jessica Parker was not nice to me, or something of the sort. And I
Oh,
was like,
really, bitch? And she had it officially.
she had, and I think it had to do with her payment. When Sex and the City first started, Sarah Jessica Parker was kind of like, the most
Mm-hmm.
up and coming person. But as the franchise went on, I think a lot of people tended to like, the character Samantha Jones more than Carrie
Yeah,
Bradshaw. So I
yeah.
think she was like, hold up now, Patrick Michael King, I think is the guy who created the whole series. She was like, I need to
Mm-hmm.
be paid more because, or at least the same. But back to our black diva, Nicole Ari Parker. Um, she, you don't know who she is because like Kerry Washingtons of the world and the Taraji P. Hensons of the world, once there's this couple of people who play these roles, you kind of forget everybody else who was in it. But she was in
Mm-hmm.
Boogie Nights. She was also the wife to Denzel Washington's character in Remember the Titans.
Yep.
She's been working for
Brown
years and she's
Sugar.
hilarious.
She was on
Exactly.
Soul Food.
What's that Martin Lawrence movie? Blue Streak. She was in Blue Streak. I don't know if y'all remember that movie, but anyway,
I don't know that movie.
he's a jewelry thief, or like he's somebody who's trying to steal
Oh,
something.
that sounds like something I would not be interested in, but she's in it. Good
It's
for her.
good for her, but I think we need this kind of refreshing energy.
Mm-hmm.
Sex and the City for years have been getting hit with y'all ain't got no black folk and no main characters, maybe
Mm-hmm.
the side characters. But
Girl,
if
they
you look
tried to
at
give
this,
Jennifer Hudson something. I was like, y'all gonna give her anything? No. They gave her two scenes
listen,
where she was
they
black. She
gave her
was
that
being the black actress.
they
Mm-hmm.
gave her that ugly ass purse in the first movie. That's what they gave her, and I would never forgive them for that. And she had to sit there and pretend like it was cute. But yeah, I can't wait to see the series now that
Yeah.
that's been brought on to me. I used to watch Sex and the City as a
Oh,
child.
me
Like that's
too.
where
Baby,
like
on Sunday, it used to come on Sundays, and so
uh
my
huh.
mom and I would watch Sex in the City, and then we would watch Queer as Folk. And then she was like, "Wait, you gay?" I was like, "Girl, if you don't get
The
out of here."
audacity, the audacity! Like you damn near had me here filing your nails and
Oh,
doing your
okay,
hair, and then
girl.
questioning the idea.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's going on right now. Of course, the other TV show that I can't get away from, the bad boyfriend in my life, is the news.
Mm.
And I don't know if y'all are looking past the fact that
Wait, is this the Bad Judy? We're going to the Bad Judy now?
I think we're going to find ourselves at a bad Judy at some point in our lives. So
Yeah,
we might as
we're
well get
there.
to the
Okay,
point. The world's on
give us
fire.
the Bad Judy.
The bad Judy right now, I have to say, is the Biden administration. It's not looking good for
They have
y'all right
fucked up this
now.
Afghanistan thing.
There are 4 presidents who have blood on their hands. There are
Yeah.
four presidents who, well, number one, it was a passing of the ball situation.
Mm-hmm.
But the United States, they pulled the troops out of Afghanistan. They pulled it pretty rapidly. Well, it started back in May. May is when slowly but surely they started pulling back troops. Now, Trump's presidency, they quote unquote struck a deal with the Taliban, and then they had already signed this into fruition. So Biden was not the one who just said we're pulling our troops out. But even from the Obama administration, the whole idea of getting troops out of this area has been an idea. But now it's gotten to the point where in 11 days, the Afghani government fell. And
Yeah.
right now we're watching videos of thousands of people
It's so sad.
bombarding an airport. And, the whole idea of we went to this part of the country, and I hate to say we, but we are taxpayers. So, like, we have to say we, because this is what's,
It's part of the world, yeah.
funding this $2 billion atrocity. The idea was to not have a part of the world hate our actual guts and want buildings taken down by planes. And if that was the idea, then clearly you wasted 20 years of trying to undo something
Also, the
that,
idea was like, that's oil land.
well, of
And
course, we're a
yeah.
capitalist society. Let's not pretend,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Um, but, I think this is just the product of being Big Brother in the world, trying to be, the end all be all. And our government needs to change. We need to stop going into these areas. This is very much like Vietnam too. I was watching
Yeah,
parallels of
it is.
how
Mm-hmm.
we got out of Vietnam, and that was an atrocity. And it's really sad. And just everything around the world right now. But that is just good God. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, there's the fires, all the damn fires everywhere. Everywhere's on fire.
Right. We got Haiti. Oh my
Oh my
goodness. Did you
gosh,
hear
I
about
know.
Haiti?
Yeah,
And I
the
hate that
earthquake.
there's always that. Did you hear? Did you hear? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's something like almost 1,500 to 2,000 people perished in this 7.2, 7.4 magnitude earthquake that hit Haiti. And unfortunately, Haiti is just prone to so many natural disasters
Yeah.
in congruence with an economy and a workforce that cannot support. There's the amount of damage that's happened in Haiti. It's like they say they can't even count it. It's past the several billions at this point. It's scary.
Wow.
It's scary. We live in privilege in this world. We in where we live. I try and look away from the news, but I'm
Yeah.
keeping my eyes peeled for some reason.
Like
But
my grandma used to say, we living in our last days. Grandma, why we gotta be living in our last days?
It feels like that when I watch the generation of kids now who have to step into a school and worry if that they're going to live, and this whole idea of mass debate in a school where COVID cases are rising amongst children. I'm like, when I look at people who are my age or older than me when I was young, did they look
Yeah.
at me like this? Did they say,
Yeah.
"Wow, my life is wrecked"? I don't know.
Access to media has a lot to do with it. And we just talked about it, and thank you for being my therapist. And now I'm thinking about happy things because, bitch, I got shit to do.
We got to think about happy things.
But,
And,
yeah.
Chaos and destruction. There's an opposite and equal reaction for everything, and we cannot let this end of the spectrum take over the good.
Yeah.
The celebratory.
Right.
We have good things to look forward to.
We want to dwell on the bad stuff, but, I hope there's something good out there for everybody. You woke up this morning, yay. You had something to eat, yay.
Go off. You brush your teeth, bitch, you did that.
You a that bitch. But we have an interview on the podcast this week, and we get into some serious tea.
Oh yes,
with an Atlanta legend, baby, a legend of the world and of an icon. I've seen her on my TV before.
Girl, African American writer, editor, transgender rights activist. I mean, she's out here like scaling and getting into these seats where women like herself don't typically even get invited to, let alone be,
The head
the
bitch in
decision
charge.
maker, the
Yes.
HBI capital C, Raquel
Yes.
Willis is with us. And we
Woo!
kiki and we haha and we get into some really deep conversations. And I'm just so thankful for her allowing her sensitivities to come up and bubble up to the top. You know, it's not. I think it's important to realize that trans women, you can't just come to them and ask them all these questions, just kind of like, you
Yeah.
have to create the environment. It has to be a safe place, a safe space. I'm so happy that she felt comfortable enough to delve out.
Everybody stay tuned. Keep listening. Make sure you're subscribing, rating, following, Patreon, all of those things. And until next time, we'll say bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hello out there, everyone in podcast land, and welcome back to Good Judy. We are so lucky to be joined by this lovely individual who is a trans activist, who is an activist for Black folks, who is just a pretty cool ass person. Please welcome to the podcast, Raquel Willis.
Hey.
Thank you.
How you doing, boo?
I'm doing well. It's great to be home, even if it's just kind of virtual and audio like. But yeah, I'm just glad to be in company with some amazing ATLians. So.
When was the last time you were here?
Last time I was in Atlanta, not that long ago. Probably, maybe it's probably been like 6 months, maybe.
Okay, that's not so bad.
Yeah,
that's not bad at all.
I had a friend who had a wedding not too long ago, so I was there for that.
Oh, we're catching up on overdue weddings. Everybody is.
Yeah, and then I'm sure I'll be back soon because my sister and her family moved back to Fayetteville, so I'll be kind of close. I'll have to fly in there for sure.
What part of Georgia are you from, or are you from Fayetteville area?
No, I'm from Augusta, so I'm not really an Atlanta girl. I've tried to be very transparent about that because I know how folks get, honey. They like real OTP. You're like outside of the.
Is that even the key at this point? You're just out of it.
Atlanta is Georgia.
And Georgia is Atlanta.
Exactly. They're one and the same. They're interchangeable.
So, Raquel, question for you. What were you first? Writer, editor, or activist?
Oh, good question. It's weird because I think with all of these things, I was doing them before I had labeled them. I mean, which I think is such a like queer and trans concept, right? We just kind of do things and live.
We didn't know who we were until we were.
Right. And then the label was put on us. And oftentimes the label is put on by other people first, right? It's not even that that you kind of start pushing that. So I would say, I guess I was a writer first. I mean, I loved writing as a kid. I loved anything creative. So I also love like visual art and drawing and doodling and all of that. A lot of people don't know that before I went to UGA, when I started at UGA, I actually was double majoring in graphic design and journalism. So I kind of had this idea that I was going to study both. And I did. I was in the art school for like 2 years. And then I was like, I don't want to stay an extra year. That's more money, honey. And then I just focused on journalism. And then I picked up a minor in women's studies. So I would say a writer first. I wrote like cheesy songs as a teenager. Like, I wasn't a journalist in the sense of like I didn't journal. That wasn't like my foray into writing. I actually wanted to be a songwriter, which is so funny.
You can still do it. It's not too late.
I guess, child, but
I can believe that you're telling me that you are an art major because I may be peeping at your room right now and I see the color coordinated books in the background. And I'm like, I appreciate that.
The books back there, honey, and color coordinated. Yes.
Roy G. Big.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing. But then the activism piece, I mean, I did activism in college, but we weren't calling ourselves activists. We were just trying to get like the non-discrimination and anti-harassment policy at UGA to include gender identity. And we did some protesting for that and did like drag shows and stuff to raise awareness about that stuff. We had like a speakers bureau on campus. So we would go to like all of these different classes, which is kind of weird to think about now because we kind of put ourselves like in a test tube and we're like, ask us anything. And these like sociology courses and psychology courses. But I don't know that we thought of it as activism. It just was what we needed to do to try and craft the world that we want to see.
Now, when you say we, who else was with you?
Oh, I mean, at the University of Georgia, there were so many people. I was also in a drag troupe. And so I actually performed a lot with like Skylar J, who is now of like Queer Eyed Netflix fame because he was in an episode, was like the father of the drag troupe. But, it was an ensemble of actually a lot of trans men and mostly white trans people. So I didn't really know any other Black trans people until I got to Atlanta, which is weird to think about. So like I came into my identity in this very white trans masculine space, which I think is pretty atypical for Black trans women.
A lot of people don't understand, and I've spent so much of my time in Atlanta. And then as I became, older and traveling, a lot of people would tell me, oh, we go to Atlanta to see Black people. Like you don't really get that out elsewhere. So I definitely understand that. And I mean, until I moved to Atlanta, I didn't have any trans friends until I moved here. And then I started realizing, oh, I have nothing but Black trans family all around me.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I really feel like my queer and like trans baseline awakening happened at UGA, even though, I mean, I came out as like gay at 14, but in Augusta. So that was scary. But I was like one of few kids who was like actually out in high school. And it's like different waves. I think the funny thing about growing up oftentimes in the South and like rural areas or closer to rural areas is like there's like a memory of like the queer kid from different eras. And it can skip like grades, right? So every grade doesn't have that like openly queer kid. And so I remember hearing about like the gay kids or the lesbian kids before I went to high school. But then when I went to this like fine arts magnet school, I went to Davidson in Augusta. I was like, where are all the queer people? That was partly why I came here, was so like I could kind of craft that in a safe space, and it didn't end up being that. And I was like the only kind of brazenly out person for a little bit.
The way that you phrase that, brazenly out, I think it's a lot of young trans women specifically. There's this sort of like ancestral brazen attitude that slowly takes them over, and they have to like figure out how to not only exist in their own bodies, but exist like in their own in spaces. If I walk into a space and it's not queer, if I don't see one queer person, it's like, hold up now, I gotta reassess.
Yeah, no, that is so true. I mean, I was starting to be so depressed because I was one of those kids who people knew. It's so fun. It's so funny when people talk about the choice kind of concept, right? Like it's a choice to be queer or be trans. I mean, we know the real choice. We're gonna own it and realize that we're that bitch, right? But I really don't feel like I ever had a choice. As soon as I was kind of conscious of the rest of the world, even though my family was like hella traditional Black Southern and also Catholic, so there were layers of like tradition there. They didn't really have like gaydar or queerdar or anything, or so they say. But my peers sensed that I was different. You know, it was like they could smell, they could sniff the femininity on me, the queerness on me. And so I was bullied for it.
At a fine arts school?
Well, I was definitely bullied more in elementary and middle school. Mm-hmm. And then I think the bullying became less, I guess, visceral. And so then it came in a more passive form of like joking about my femininity, or even people outright asking me, so are you gay? You know? And that happened a lot. I think by the time I got to 9th grade, which is why I ended up coming out, I was just getting asked over and over. And by that point, I knew I was queer, and I didn't actually have a problem with it. For whatever reason, I had been in like those seedy Yahoo chat rooms and like on those like forums and
Don't
shit.
get me started on those rooms.
Oh, I feel read and seen.
But it's the thing. And that was how I guess I built up my resolve around, oh, there are other like queer people out there. So this isn't actually that weird. It's just where I live and the time. And by the time I got to 9th grade, I was just sick of having to deny it because I didn't actually see it as a bad thing.
So you go to UGA, you survive, you moved to Atlanta, and then you ran away.
And then I ran away. Well, really quick, I mean, UGA, the idea of surviving, I mean, yeah, I was lucky I was able to kind of carve out my own little space. But I mean, I literally started my social and medical transition on UGA campus, right? Mm-hmm. With no other like Black trans people, and particularly women, to bounce off of. So the weird thing is like, I actually think it was easier to transition publicly then as a student than it would be now. Because at least then, like, I had like a benefit of the doubt to kind of bounce off of. People didn't have all these kind of preconceptions and misconceptions around transness. It was just kind of like, you were a wild card. Yeah. Right. And I could define myself for who I was. And there wasn't so much kind of political fodder to kind of cut through. Whereas now, I would imagine it might be difficult in a lot of ways to come out and transition on campus at UGA.
It's a whole gambit. Well, for me, for my experience, whenever I see somebody saying that they're about to transition, it's either you have this community of people who is like celebrating you and wants to donate to your GoFundMe, is sharing it on social media. And then there's almost this scope, not only from outside of our community, but inside of our community, there's this how dare you kind of thing. And, I could not imagine, having to step out into something that is so perceived. So, I mean, that's interesting that you had to like carve your own way into your own existence.
Yeah, I mean, that is so true. There is always like, I think, tension, even internally within the community around how we navigate the identities that we navigate and how people take that personally, even within our community, right? If you're not, I think it's lessening now the pressure, but especially then, I think I might be a completely different person if the conversations around the binary were like different then. So much has shifted in such a short amount of time. Mm-hmm. And I feel like for a lot of millennials, especially those of us who started transitioning like a decade ago or around that time, we were kind of like the last wave of like folks who only really had the option of or thought of being stealth, right? And that was our path to having a future. And so when I left UGA, I actually was stealth in my first job in Monroe, Georgia. I was a news reporter in Monroe, Georgia. So even smaller than Athens, but I didn't see a possibility of me being out and being able to start my journalism career. And so it is so interesting now that there's so many more options. Like that idea of being stealth is actually in a lot of circles, kind of a BS cop-out, right? Because so much has shifted in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, it's true.
So that was my experience. Yeah. And once I got to Atlanta, that kind of freed me of the shackle of being stealth because I met so many different types of people. And I was exposed to the idea that, oh, there's a larger movement. There is a movement of us out here who are trying to shift things. And so I came out in my second professional job when I was in Atlanta because of that.
Yeah, when you mention the phrase stealth, and for people who are listening who don't know what stealth means, it means that this person can walk into the everyday life and nobody question their gender identity. But what would you have to say? Because, I have a lot of really close trans girlfriends, and, whenever they free up this information to me, because I don't, press or pry, there's this insecurity behind not being passable. As someone who does say, you can be stealth, what would you say to those who are still struggling with that notion? Because at the end of the day, it shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't. It takes work, but you have to figure out what beauty means for you. And I think what has been helpful along the way has been kind of understanding that actually trans people aren't the only ones dealing with these pressures, right? Like when we talk about gender dysphoria, I don't believe anymore that is just isolated to trans and non-binary folks or even gender non-conforming folks. I actually think most cis people experience gender dysphoria as well, because we all have gender and we all are kind of brushing up against these expectations. Some of us in more drastic ways, right? But we're all experiencing that. And so when I think about, the IG baddie kind of industrial complex.
The BBL.
Right, the BBL effect. That is, in a lot of ways, cis women typically experiencing a bit of gender dysphoria, right? Around not having this ideal kind of feminine, quote unquote, body, right? Or aesthetic. And interestingly, a lot of that aesthetic, as I think more and more people in our community are talking about, is drawn from the interventions that a lot of trans women historically have had to make to try and pass in society, right? So everything from fillers, right? The girls was getting fillers decades ago, right? The girls were getting their bodies done decades ago. So it's so interesting that people don't see those connections. And and so it's interesting to me. So I think people have to figure out what beauty is to them. I think one other thing too is beyond gender, especially for folks of color and particularly Black trans women and femme folks and non-binary folks, is understanding that we're also brushing up against these white supremacist ideals of beauty. And so have whatever intervention that you want to have, but make sure as much as possible it's on your own terms. Now, I think it's impossible for us to completely strip away these expectations because it is ingrained in us, right? And we will forever be trying to unlearn these ideals. But just be sure, whatever doctor or medical professional or surgeon that you go into, see that a lot of the considerations that they will tell you to have around your face and around your body are white supremacist ideals, right? And if you want that, fine. That's your agency. but you also have a choice to not want that or to figure out your own unique look.
Well, and also it's really interesting now that the Western ideal beauty standards are shifting to that of Black people. Like, of all the ass and all the body and
all the lips
and the tan and the full lips and the nose, not the nose yet. The nose,
she could be a little sharper.
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting. I mean, but it is in a lot of ways just the aesthetic. One thing that comes up for me a lot as I kind of look on social media and on TikTok in particular is, there are a lot of folks who are not Black who are trying to be Black in a lot of ways. But still, I think the disrespect, the degradation that Black women, Black queer folks experience is like, we're like bombarded with it, especially now because social media does two things. Like in some instances, it puts up a veneer and puts up a fantasy, and in other ways it strips a lot of the fantasy and a lot of that veneer away. And so we see some of the ugliest things that we have known for a long time to be true, but we see it kind of, it gives us the evidence of its truth. And so we see Black women called undesirable and
everything but a child of God.
Child of God. I was just about to say that.
Everything but a child of God, right? Yeah. So that happens a lot. We see Black queer and trans folks, and particularly children, being shown as deserving of violence. We see justifications for the discrimination that we face, the violence that we face. So it's hard, right? Because yes, there are a lot of people who want to look like us and embody us. And in a lot of ways, there's an overlap with a contingent of folks who are heavily invested in us not existing.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about your ascension to being that bitch. Okay, let's celebrate you. Let's celebrate you. Let's go ahead and burn.
I was waiting. We got to go to this. Yes,
we got to go. You had this pretty big title with the Transgender Law Center, and then you became the editor of Out magazine. Of course, I'm guessing that's a big span of time. But when you look back at everything you've accomplished, what is some things that you are looking forward to doing, next?
Yeah. Well, I'll say I think I always give love and kudos to Atlanta, the community in Atlanta, for first kind of giving me access to understanding my power and understanding community power. I mean, Atlanta was where I was radicalized around particularly Black, queer, and trans power. And spaces like Solutions Not Punishments Collaborative and Southern Fried Queer Pride, like those were spaces that I saw that in action, right? So, I think it's been important to kind of carry that through my career. I did kind of have this idea for a long time that like, I got to get out of Georgia, right? Like,
who doesn't have that feeling?
And that was my trauma, around being Black, queer, and trans in particularly Augusta and Athens and feeling so alone. I think some of that started to dissolve when I was in Atlanta and I was like, oh, there is so much power here. And I think when I went to, like, for instance, Trans Law Center, once I was there for a bit and I kind of felt like I had enough agency to kind of buck against these kind of institutional
nuck if you buck
mores. Yeah, the nuck if you buck vibe. It was like, okay, you say you're a national organization, but what are you doing specifically and particularly for Black trans people, and specifically and particularly for Black trans people in the South? And so that gave birth to Black Trans Circles, which is now a part of its core programming, which was focused on the healing justice interventions for Black trans women in areas of high rates of violence and murder, right? So particularly in the New Orleans area, a lot of that work touched there. When I was out, you know, and I kind of moved into this New York media bubble, I wanted to do work that kind of burst that, right? And so that's why I've unabashedly written about queer and trans experiences of color, and particularly Black queer and trans experiences in my work, and pushed for those cover stories like The Mothers and Daughters of the Movement, with Tourmaline and Miss Major on the cover of Out, which hadn't been done, right? To have a Black trans elder on the cover, like that was
which
important.
In today's time, it's like it's a no-brainer at this point.
Right. You know, a lot of the work that we're doing then is reflected now in some of these other spaces. Doing work around Sylvia Rivera and kind of the organizing blueprint that she laid as a trans Latina for a lot of the housing initiatives in particular, but actually a lot of the trans-led organizations that started to spring up in the early 2000s, like Trans Law Center and NCTE and so many of these others, and so many other projects, Sylvia Rivera Law Project, of course, right? That was important. And then, of course, the Trans Obituaries Project, where I delved into the story of Layleen Polanco, a 27-year-old Afro-Latina who died in Rikers Island, the prison here in New York City. That was so important as a cover story. So all of that has been informed by a lot of the experiences I had in Atlanta, because working with SNAPCO, it was my introduction to abolition and the irredeemable qualities of our quote unquote criminal justice system. It was working with Black trans sex workers to stop the profiling of them and harassment of them by the Atlanta Police Department. Right. It was those experiences. It was going to those rallies with Black, queer, and trans people during that time period where the movement for Black, it was like the first iteration of the movement for Black lives, right? Because now I feel like we're in a second iteration post George Floyd. But those were the formative experiences for me around my political lens. And so I always try to give kudos to that and to the folks who made that possible.
Whew. Speak on it.
Speak on all of it.
So Raquel, what are you doing right now? What is like on the forefront of your mind, your brain? What is propelling you through life right now?
What is propelling me through life right now? Well, a lot of my work now is, I guess, more behind the scenes. It's a lot of kind of resource moving, like working with different companies and brands around how they can support grassroots efforts led by Black, queer, and trans folks, particularly trans folks. And so that has been an important kind of part of my work. I'm doing work with GLAAD right now on different types of media interventions around how queer and trans experiences are covered in the news, because I think we talk so much about this misinformation and disinformation kind of era, kind of post-Trump, but we don't talk enough about how complicit news media is in the violence that queer and trans people face. So that's been very rewarding. And then I'm also, I guess, predominantly working on my first memoir/book.
Oh.
So yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So that is exciting, because through this project, I'm not really doing an origin story in terms of like my trans identity. It kind of started as that. And then I was like, that's not actually what I think people need right now. And so I really wanted to tell my coming of activism. And so that means that a lot of it, or at least a segment of it, is focused on some of my experiences in Atlanta during a lot of the time period that we've discussed now. So that's exciting. And yeah, and I'm just trying to really make social justice feel accessible, and that people understand that it's a universal kind of imposter syndrome that we're up against, right? This idea that I don't have anything, I don't have any power. You know, I hope people will read this and be like, oh, I do have power, right? No matter where I come from,
right,
or whatever. And we all have these moments of activation. You know, one of the moments of activation for me in Atlanta, amongst so many things, was the suicide of Lela Alcorn, a young trans teen. And that really pushed me to want to come out in my career as a journalist, as a Black trans person, but also be more dedicated to the fight for liberation. And then I also just want to kind of buck up against this idea that, like, the label matters. Like, to me, the label of activist doesn't matter as much as what you do. And I think, you know, throughout my work, I've kind of dealt with that imposter syndrome, because I came from a background of journalism and writing. And so I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that simply with the tools and skills that I learned in journalism school. Like, I actually had to be in the fight so I could speak from an authentic place, and understand the white supremacy, the cis hetero patriarchy, the classism that is baked into the journalism industry, like every other industry.
Yeah, it's you know, like you're saying before, you didn't even know you were doing activism, you know, in college. And it's having integrity is standing up for something. And I feel like we're at a reckoning right now, especially social media, like, you know, the good, the evil of it. But everyone is kind of an activist. Everyone.
I agree with that. Yeah. If you have a basic regard for human life, that's activism. It really isn't that hard. I think it's like, you know, once you become radicalized, like Raquel said perfectly, that's when it becomes fervent. That's when it becomes, I have to see this through, or I don't have a regard for my own life.
Right. Right. And you know, I think that there are different ways we can also look at it, right? Because for me, maybe the activation comes first, right? So being activated comes before the radicalization, because to me, a radicalization involves an intentional kind of learning, whether it's you know, a book learning, right, or it is learning out amongst people who are actually organizing, which I actually think is oftentimes more important than the theorizing that happens, right? Like, when I think of like a Black trans, I guess, for instance, a Black trans feminist theory, much of that is not written yet. And so I also hope that this book can be a part of building that canon, because to me,
it will be.
Our canon is not like other canons in that there's so much theory out there about the Black trans experience. A lot of our canon is from lived experience. A lot of it is still in kind of this like ancient, you know, kind of indigenous African sense. A lot of it is still oral. A lot of it is still us just living, right, and passing this knowledge on. And so I hope that a Black trans canon will continue to expand and materialize. And I want to be a part of that, right? Like, I think that is so important. And I know I won't be able to touch on everything. I think a lot of my experiences in Atlanta set the tone for me understanding, at the end of the day, it's not about me, but it's about who I leave the door open for. Right. And that's what I hope my work will continue to do, and particularly this book.
Raquel, it's been so nice to talk to you. You know, I've been a lead organizer with SFQP. So
I know.
SFQP since 2017.
I didn't see you on social media. I know we haven't met in person, but I didn't see you.
I know. Every time when your name is mentioned in like a meeting, it's like this metaphorical light just comes into the room for a brief second. So it's just been so nice to actually experience that light and see your face and hear your words in real life. So hopefully we can meet IRL, as they say. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Also, before we go, Raquel, how can everyone follow you, social media?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same person on almost every platform. So you can find me at RaquelWillis.com, but I'm Raquel Willis on Twitter, on IG, Facebook,
TikTok.
And I'm on TikTok, but I don't really do that much. I always want to do more, but it's hard because I do feel like I've hit 30 now.
I'm like, it's for kids for me. I'm like,
I've hit 30 now, child. I ain't trying to be out here making a fool of myself, acting like I got more rhythm than I actually do. So yeah, and I also am just not on social media as heavy as I used to be. Like, I'm more of a lurker. I used to be very engaged, and then I realized how draining it was and how circular these conversations are. Like, I don't want to be going back and forth with people about why homophobia and queerphobia and transphobia and white supremacy and all these things are bad because I did that in 2014. Give me something new to chew on. So.
Give me more. Yeah.
Well, Raquel, thank you so much for this lovely, lovely interview. Next time you're in Atlanta, hit us up. We need to grab a cocktail or two or whatever. And like we always sign off of each interview, we'll say, bye.
Bye, Judy.
Bye, Judy.
Bye.
Good Judy is a Wussy Mag podcast hosted by Ellasaurus Rex and Brigitte Bidet. Subscribe, rate, and review us anywhere you get your podcasts.
Good Judy is produced by John Dean. Podcast art designed by Nick Sheridan, and our music is created by DJ Helix. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Good Judy Pod. Talk to you next week.
Bye, Judy.